Dom and Johnny in the morning.
Okay, so over the past few weeks, we've gotten the chance to work with a few different masters in our style. And not just masters, but like high-ranking masters, like have been around for like 30 plus years at least. And one of the things that I thought would be interesting to talk about today is just what it's like working with masters at that level as opposed to where we spend most of our time, which is teaching beginners, mostly children. And what I thought, one of the masters we worked with was Master LePan in Vermont. Both of us took a drive up there so that you could do a personal with him that I recorded. So if you're on Facebook, you can follow Kempo Reject. That's Dominic's handle on that platform. But one of the things I thought was really interesting that he talked about was just how in the martial arts there are really like kind of 3 stages that you can look at. I actually think he said 4, but I remember 3 of them. And one of them, and the beginning one that we start with, is just the art, which is kind of a choreographed curriculum that helps your body learn the foundational mechanics that will allow it to be successful over time. And we spend a lot of time on the art because, as we've said in many past episodes, the unorthodox movements of the art is what allows your body to remain pliable and allow yourself to prevent injury into your later years so that way you can get more life in your years and more years in your life. So the second stage is self-defense, which, I just led another women's self-defense seminar this past weekend. And one of the things that I make very clear with self-defense is that your goal is not to incapacitate your attacker. Your goal is to create a disruption to be able to get away. Usually that disruption is by trying to figure out how to inflict the most amount of pain to the other person as quickly as possible so that you can skedaddle. The one thing about self-defense is that while we teach some very basic movements, there's not enough time to really refine and practice it, where it's a consistent, reliable skill that also minimizes the amount of damage you have incoming. Even like a palm heel strike, if you don't know how to form your hand correctly, you can bend your wrist kind of funny, your elbow can get kind of jammed. There are a lot of injuries that can happen. And you're still probably hurting the other person a lot more, and that's creating enough of a disruption to get away. And then the third level is the fight, which is you have 2 consensual participants in an exchange, and that's where a lot of like the strategy and the training and the part we spend most of our time at Black Belt and beyond talking about. And so a lot of times, because we're working with beginners or we're working with people who are afraid for their safety, we spend a lot of time on more the art and the self-defense side. And I think one of the things, having worked with many masters now, is that there is a shift once you get high enough in level where you're not training out of a fear of your safety. You're training to refine your ability to fight effectively. So that's kind of figured how I'd laid the foundation for this. So I don't know if you have any thoughts, or it was the 4th one, combat sports.
Yeah, and which is a land that Master Freddie LePan lives in. Being such an accomplished sport martial artist, both on the point sparring side and also in a combat sport side. Being a champion kickboxer, he is a pretty incredible, accomplished martial artist. And the more I hang in this style, the more I realize the more like spokes keep getting added to this wheel. So if I was to sum it up, I would think that the hub would be the art, and then each of these spokes comes out because you have Freddie's, like you were just saying, the self-defense, the fight, and the sport. But then if you keep going around the wheel, depending on who you talk to, especially we have the benefit of learning from Master Ken, who had a very unique line to Master Fritz. Mm-hmm. So the whole life integration is, I would say, that's another spoke, because that's completely different. That's using the martial arts to navigate every problem you have in your life, a difficult conversation, your job, just your own work ethic. I would say that another spoke that comes from Ken, and probably Master Lepan too, is fitness. Fitness, I would say, is another spoke. So you have the art, and then you have all these spokes around the wheel. And the longer I work with higher ranking masters, the more I'm just like, oh, this needs another spoke.
Well, and that is one thing that also stands out. The more different masters I have the privilege to work with, the more they have a unique lens that they put on the art. And even though a lot of them are good at a lot of different things, they do have their specialties. So Master Lepan, like, his specialty is the mechanics and the body physics, I would say. Like, and I'm not saying that that's the only thing he's good at. I'm just saying, like, from the 2 hours I spent watching you learn from him, you could tell there was this, like, incredible precision in understanding how your body mechanics work and the physics of where he'd need to be in order to be most effective for what he's doing, whether it's a combat sport thing or if it's a life or death fight or something, like anywhere in between. Ken is on a different path, and he's very open about that, where the physics and the body mechanics are important. And it's because if you do the sheer probability, like, the chances of slipping and falling are a lot greater than getting attacked. So it is good to know how to defend yourself if you get attacked. It's also good to know how to fight someone else that knows how to fight. And to him, the specialty is more in the life integration spoke, like you said. And I do think that, like, some of these are spokes and some of them are hierarchical. So, like, you can't really get good at the fight part until you satisfy the self-defense skill set. Because if you can't defend yourself against just anybody, like, when you have a specialist or an expert in combatives, how are you going to be able to navigate that situation?
To speak in your terms, it's kind of like D&D.
Okay.
Or any other RPG where you get a little bit of control over your stats. And unless you're using cheat codes like Master Valari, you kind of have to pick and choose where you put your stat points. We only have so much life. I hope I live to 200, but
Yeah.
In my lifespan, I have to choose where I'm gonna put my stats. And some people max out the fight side. That's where they want to live. That is their no matter what. Every time you level up, all your stats are going to move up a little bit. But you can devote yourself to each one of these spokes, and use those bonus stat points.
Yep.
To really buff one side. So you have someone like Freddy, who definitely is buffing that combat sport side and combat. I mean, the man's a brilliant tactician. And then you have masters like Master Rob Whitney, who is he kind of buffs the wellness through the martial arts and the fight, which seems like two opposing. He doesn't really care as much about the sport. It's wellness and death.
Right.
And then you have Master Ken, who is obviously brilliant, self-defense and fighter. I wouldn't mess with him.
Yeah.
But you can tell just by how physically fit he is, and how good he is at teaching teachers. Where he has put most of his stats over the years. Now, granted, if we were to compare my stat card with Master Ken's stat card, there is not one spoke that I would exceed, and that's just from the level of years and dedication he put in.
I would disagree, because actually, Stephanie and I privately had a conversation once just about everyone's strengths and the unique things they add. And she said that your eye for creating crisp performances is Ken is very developed in that skill set. And she said there was something about the way you would construct the story of a demonstration that, he could do, but you could do better. So I I don't know that I'd say that there's nothing that you don't bring to the table more than he does. Like,
I'm gonna try really hard not to let that affect my ego. But,
well, yeah, but like I mean, like so we've been doing forms competitions to get ready for our local tournament. And one of the things that we were just talking about are like the way that you win a forms competition, especially in the eyes of different judges. And, I've said it on the podcast before, but when you're doing Swift Tigers and you hit that first side kick at the beginning of the form, I'm convinced that's probably the most weighted reason why you consistently get gold in various forms competitions. There's just something about the line that you hit and how good it looks. I don't know if I'd recommend fighting with it, but again, that's not what that competition is. One of the other things you get from masters is a lot of times when you look at them, they almost to the untrained eye look sloppy because they've taken away all of the edges. So there's there's no point where you can really block. That being said, you also can't tell what's going on unless you're really, really trained. So especially from a teaching perspective, having crisp mechanics and being able to hold and have an audience that may not be trained themselves understand, what's going on, but can see that stuff is going on. I think that's an incredibly powerful skill set. And for those of us who do train, we can appreciate the fitness and the dedication that goes in to refining underlying mechanics to that degree.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about forms anyways. Unpopular opinion, I'm sure. But, I feel like, if I'm thinking about the self-defense or the fight, I'm living in my combinations and I'm sparring. But forms, I feel like that is the best time to build that strength and flexibility, to be able to hit those high kicks that I'm probably not going to be doing in my practical applications.
Yeah.
Or to get really low, probably not going to do if I'm in the sparring ring or, in my combinations. And when I was under black belt, I was beaten consistently by a few people. And it made me really want to get better at forms. One of them, and I don't know if he still trains, you might have to check on that for me, but Anthony Neary. And his lines, man, he would get below. His lines were beautiful. The man's forms looked incredible. And I wanted to win, and it wasn't until I left for a bit and came back that I really started winning. Besides in our tournaments, but I feel like we had different parameters. We were looking for transfer of power.
Yeah.
Sometimes the crisp lines weren't as important, and that's just how our school was.
Well, it kind of depends on who your judge was.
Yeah.
So, I know for sure Master Stephanie, she, I think in the past, if not still, she would prioritize a clean line over transference of power. I think Ken would be the opposite. Yeah. He would prioritize transference of power more than holding a clean line. Yeah. So,
in forms competition back then, that was our judges panel. It was Stephanie, Ken, Sean, Jenny.
Yeah. Really, if you want to loop it back, working with masters, they each have a unique perspective informed by their life path. That leads to this mastery of usually some kind of specialization, but it is informed by the other spokes, as you said. So, for example, a lot of our adults, they're not really here to learn how to fight. They're here to be great role models for their kids. And part of being a great role model for your kid is role modeling what wellness looks like. And wellness and fitness are not the same, but they are highly related. So, if you're able to crank out, 25, 50 push-ups, that's going to give you a much better shot at wellness. That being said, there are some people that I've met, that are gym rats that from a fitness perspective, they may be, highly developed, but they've ignored the mental emotional side, which is a key part of wellness. I've definitely also met other people that, they're really great at kind of the philosophical, the mental, emotional side, but they've neglected the physical health. So they're, like you said, when you focus on the fitness, you do level up. There is something to be said about how fitness develops resiliency, which is a mental benefit. That doesn't mean you can ignore the mental benefit, but if you level up that fitness stat, it does kind of help push the mental, spiritual side along a little, and vice versa. Like, there are times where if you're moving mindfully, like, that's going to help level up your fitness stat faster than someone who's going to be a little more reckless and maybe hurt themselves trying to do fitness things that their body may not be ready for.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, I couldn't agree more with that. That's, and I feel that way all the time, especially right now. I have a desk with like 30 letters on it. All having to deal with like government stuff that I've never had to deal with before.
Right.
And it is sometimes like overwhelming because I don't know where to start, and so I'm seeking help from anywhere I can, and I'm working through it. But I think a lot of that resiliency to push through it does come from being pushed beyond what you think is physically possible.
Right.
And if you can break through that barrier, then yeah, the mental is absolutely related. It makes you feel like you could break through those mental barriers too.
Yeah.
Even though it's definitely a different kind of stress.
So I guess just to ask you your experience, because I know that there are a lot of masters you've reached out to and you've gotten to work with an unusually high number of high-ranking martial artists in this system that each have a deep history with the art. What's the thing that stands out to you that like separates the masters that have been around for a while from other people that are maybe either just experts or they're lower-ranking black belts?
I would say that there hits a point where there is a level of self-exploration, because Master Valari was very big into the principles, and he pushed the principles through the art on his students. And when they got to a certain point, they took those principles and they explored how they could use those principles in their own unique ways. So working with a fifth degree, or even someone like me, a fourth degree, if you were to work with me and another handful of fourth degrees, you might get a different but similar experience. But when you're working with, so when I went down, I got to work with Master Joan Rickert. If I didn't know it was the same style, then I would think, like if someone told me, oh, this is this style, and then I worked with Master Freddie Lepan, he said, oh, this is this style, I would believe it. Because it does seem like a completely different art, even though the principles are the same. So, and then, I got to work with Master O'Brien, which was also an incredible experience. And it was the same thing. And he has a very different take on the art as well, which came mostly from Master John Fritz. But he got like Master John Fritz's fight side, and he moves very different too. He lives in that Tibetan crane world, and it is a crazy experience to work with him, because he is incredibly efficient, and every time you try and take a step, one of your knees is getting buckled by one of his legs, and it's just absolutely insane. But it feels like a completely different art. And it makes me think of, and I know that not many listeners, especially if they're younger, are going to get this reference, but there was an old TV show called Kung Fu with David Carradine.
I have not watched it.
It's pretty hokey.
Well, and it's also a lot of like martial arts memery.
Yes.
Yeah, came from that.
It's definitely pretty hokey, but it was one of the things that really blew up Shaolin in America. Just because they're seeing that it was all the mysticism.
Yeah.
The West was seeing, but in it, when he's in the temple, he's getting shown around, and the master is pointing out all these masters training, and they're all doing different animal styles. And he's like, oh, tiger, crane, whatever. And then he says each one would take a lifetime to master. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's how it is in this system. So you couldn't master everything, and like I said, Master Valari was using cheat codes. he was definitely a savant of a martial artist. Um, but even him, he probably had directions that he wanted to continue his training, and unfortunately, just was cut short. Um, and his students are now going to progress in those areas and possibly, become more skilled in one of those areas than even he was, just because, it's nice when you have a teacher that can, take 50 years of knowledge and teach it to you in 20 years.
Yeah.
And that's kind of cool. So then they could take the next 30 years and kind of expand on it. And that's where most of those masters are now. They're in that expansion period. So depending on who you're working with, it will feel like a completely different style. But if you really look, you'll see the principles are the same.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is it's just having crossed that threshold myself over the past year, just kind of trying to self-observe like my own patterns and thoughts and everything. There is something about, being bestowed the title of mastery that gives you, yeah, I waved my hand magically. It gives you permission to kind of be yourself. So there's like a certain point in your training where the crucial part is you're trusting your teacher, that your teacher is acting as an awakened guide to bring the best out of you. You still have to do the work, but you're trusting their guidance in figuring a lot of it out. And there is a shift that I think kind of starts around third degree in our style. But really, the plant breaches the soil at fifth degree, where you have permission to kind of be yourself. And what I mean by that is when Master Rickert, who you mentioned, was up for the seminar this past November, as I was watching her move, one of her students, who is also an accomplished master, he came over and he was just like, just watch how she moves her feet, because this is what she does because of her body. So, she has a little bit less range. Her arms are a little bit shorter, but she's mastered footwork and positioning. So to neutralize that disadvantage, to be able to wield a principle more effectively and in such a subtle way that you could easily underestimate how she can get into the best position. So I think a lot of it is that not only is there kind of the mental part of the specialization, but you just get so in tune with what your body's strengths are and using what others would assume of your disadvantages to be able to surprise them. So, even Master Lepan, one of the things that he said very clearly, everyone's like, well, of course, but it was different hearing him say it, is that he kind of moves like the leopard a little more. So because he doesn't have like a long reach, he's gotten incredibly good at timing, footwork, and strategy to be able to maximize the physics of his positioning to be able to overcome a situation. Very different than Master Fritz, who, although he was a master of all 5 animals, would often prefer the crane because his reach was a lot more. Like Ken kind of has a similar build where, they're kind of thinner, they've got a longer reach, they're able to utilize structure and spacing to basically gas the opponent out so that they don't have to work as hard. I think a lot of what we're recognizing, with each master seemingly having their own style within the style is just they've mastered themselves to a point. And when they have a mentor or a teacher or a peer, it's there to give feedback so that they can self-improve, as opposed to having a teacher tell them how to improve.
And now, you like you said, you're crossing that threshold. Like you obviously are expected to have a mastery knowledge of all the animals, but when people seek you out one day, which they will, what animal are they going to be seeking you out for?
That's a good question. I think in terms of the life integration, I think snake tends to be the one. So I find that when I'm in a committee, my role tends to be to pierce the noise and, be able to leverage the ounce that moves 1,000 pounds. So why use a lot word when few word to trick? And I've been told I tend to be pretty concise, even though on this podcast I talk a lot. But part of it is just you're trying to pierce to the heart of the matter so that you can get the most leverage in the most efficient way. I think from the arts perspective, I'm really uncomfortable saying leopard because my footwork could use a lot of work, and a lot of my timing and stuff could use a lot of work. But I think it would also be snake, but not from like the suppleness perspective, more like just trying to figure out the precision of how to get the most impact in the least amount of moves. What would you answer if let's pretend you were a 5th degree right now?
Probably leopard.
Yeah.
Yeah, just I'm tiny, I'm like a little cat. So
Is there something from like the art perspective that you feel like?
yeah, so I have a significant speed advantage.
Yeah.
And I know that won't be there forever. Mm-hmm. Then again, who knows? Master Freddie Le Pen, speed advantage.
Yeah.
Some people say, oh, I'm not quick. I just have good timing. Master Le Pen is both. He is still significantly fast.
Yeah. Well, and part of that is his fitness.
Yeah.
He is you could just watch like how the muscles fired. Like, dude is in shape.
Yeah. Yeah. Even especially whenever he like grabbed me, and I could feel like his forearm against my arm, and it just felt like steel.
Yeah.
I'm like, oh my goodness, like this man is in crazy good shape.
Right.
Made me want to get in crazy good shape.
Was there anything else on this topic that comes to mind?
No, I think that if anyone out there ever gets a chance to work with a higher ranking master, even just for like an eye-opening moment, it is really cool to see what is possible through years and years of dedication. And it may transcend what you believe is possible.